Thank you very much, Ceann Comhairle. Ceann Comhairle, rents are too high. There are too many people paying too much money to keep a roof over their heads. Since 2016, when the last government's housing strategy Rebuilding Ireland was introduced, rents across the state have increased by an astonishing 40%. Average asking rates across the state are now €1,400 per month. And in Dublin, over the same period, the situation is much, much worse. Rents have increased an astonishing 70%, and asking rents in Dublin City and County are now €2,000 per month. It is €7,500 a year more expensive to rent in Dublin today than when Rebuilding Ireland was first launched. Now, while COVID-19 has shifted the focus of the debate onto emergency measures to protect renters, the deeper structural problems remain. Research by the Economic and Social Research Institute shows that 70% of workers in the lower 25% of earnings have high housing costs, paying up to 40% of their take-home pay on rent. These are people who are not eligible for HAP or other rental supports. Even those who can access such social housing supports, the impact of high rents means high top-up payments in addition to their differential rent to the council. For example, the gap between HAP rates in Dublin and market rent is now €700 a month for a family and an astonishing €900 a month for a single person. The impact of high rents on people is immense, having to choose in some instances between rent, heat and food, having to work longer hours or in some cases second jobs, having to put off having children or buying a home, unable to save for a deposit or indeed save for a rainy day. And at its very hardest edge, it increases poverty and forces some families and single people into homelessness. While we urgently need the government to extend the COVID-19 ban on rent increases, and I have to say it's astonishing that the Cabinet made a decision on this yesterday, but it has yet to be announced, given the huge anxiety among renters and indeed landlords across the state. We also need to deal with the underlying problem of high rents. And the bill that I'm introducing today would seek to ban all rent increases for existing and new tenancies for a period of 3 years. It would apply to existing tenancies at the rate that they're currently being charged, and all new tenancies on the basis of the local Residential Tenancies Board rent index for that area and for that property size. The ban would be reviewed annually and automatically expire at the end of 3 years. Of course, if the government, as Sinn Féin has said before, we will complement this measure with the refundable tax credit, putting a month's rent back in every renter's pocket, as well as a major investment in affordable cost rental accommodation on public land, with rents between €700 and €900 per month. Now, when we introduced a similar piece of legislation at the end of the last Dáil, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael said it would deter future investment and that it would be unconstitutional. Institutional investment in the private rental sector benefits from record high rents and excessively generous tax breaks. So I have to say, preventing rents from increasing any further would have no impact on current levels of investment. Restrictive interpretations of the Constitution are, in my view, too often used as a fig leaf by government who do not have the political will to act. And while the government, of course, takes the advice of the Attorney-General, the government should also listen to the country's leading constitutional law experts. When the government claimed that our last bill was unconstitutional, David Kenny, Assistant Professor of Law at Trinity College Dublin, one of the authors of the country's leading textbooks on the Constitution, said, and I quote, "There is an argument that the rent freeze bill violates constitutional property rights, but it is not at all clear that this argument would succeed. There is a good chance that, in deference to the Oireachtas judgment and the scale of the housing crisis, that the courts would uphold the bill. Indeed, I cannot think of any Supreme Court precedent on property rights in the last 20 years that would suggest that the courts would invalidate a measure such as the one under deliberation." Rachel Walsh, again Assistant Professor of Law at Trinity College Dublin, said, and I quote, "Where a clear objective is identifiable for a restriction of the exercise of property rights that plausibly secures the common good and social justice and is procedurally fair, there is every chance such legislation surviving constitutional balance." Ultimately, of course, it is the courts that would decide, so the real question is whether the government has the political will to stand up for renters and go all the way to the courts to protect them from excessive rents. The ban on rent increases Bill 2020 that I am introducing today is reasonable, proportionate, fair and, most importantly, absolutely necessary to protect hundreds of thousands of hard-pressed renters, and I commend it to the House.
Thank you very much.